Well, let me answer that in a number of ways. The first thing is, this is obviously the end of the NATO summit, and what President Trump said at the end of the meeting was really instructive because all the leaders spoke in the meeting, and at the end, President Trump summed up and said that he was very pleased and welcomed the spirit of the meeting and the unity of the meeting. And therefore, in terms of what's the outcome here, and answering that question, is NATO stronger and more united coming out of this summit, then the answer is yes to that. And that really was all of our main purpose. In relation to defence spending, what I would say is this, that we've now increased defence spending twice in the 2 years that I've been Prime Minister, and now we've taken it to £300 billion over 4 years. That is a record in terms of the amount being spent, and it's the biggest sustained increase for half a century. And it was telling, I think, that that was noted in the NATO meeting, where they were looking very much at the capability that the UK provides to NATO. And of course, we must never leave out of account that we make our nuclear capability is committed to all of our NATO allies, and that is highly valued as well. So actually, this has been a good summit, achieved what we wanted to achieve, which is unity. So important that we have that, particularly with the conflicts going on in Ukraine and the conflict in Iran.
Prime Minister, President Trump has criticised you again today for your initial refusal to allow the US to use the Chagos Islands for the Iran strikes, and it was part of a wider broadside against NATO partners over Iran, over Greenland, over defence spending. Mark Rutte replied to Trump saying that if he hadn't have been in the White House, you would not have committed the extra $15 billion to defence spending. Is he right?
Well, let me answer that in a number of ways. The first thing is, this is obviously the end of the NATO summit, and what President Trump said at the end of the meeting was really instructive because all the leaders spoke in the meeting, and at the end, President Trump summed up and said that he was very pleased and welcomed the spirit of the meeting and the unity of the meeting. And therefore, in terms of what's the outcome here, and answering that question, is NATO stronger and more united coming out of this summit, then the answer is yes to that. And that really was all of our main purpose. In relation to defence spending, what I would say is this, that we've now increased defence spending twice in the 2 years that I've been Prime Minister, and now we've taken it to £300 billion over 4 years. That is a record in terms of the amount being spent, and it's the biggest sustained increase for half a century. And it was telling, I think, that that was noted in the NATO meeting, where they were looking very much at the capability that the UK provides to NATO. And of course, we must never leave out of account that we make our nuclear capability is committed to all of our NATO allies, and that is highly valued as well. So actually, this has been a good summit, achieved what we wanted to achieve, which is unity. So important that we have that, particularly with the conflicts going on in Ukraine and the conflict in Iran.
Prime Minister, President Trump was quite critical of you in the UK in public. Was he different to you, therefore, in private?
Well, we've always got on as two individuals. That is important because it really matters in politics to have a relationship that is a working relationship. I'm really mindful of the fact that the strategic alliance between the UK and the US is hugely important in defence, in relation to our defence, our security and our intelligence, where we work together 24/7. And of course, NATO is a transatlantic alliance strengthened by both sides of that, and therefore I do think it's important for the British Prime Minister to have a good relationship with the President of the United States. I'm glad that that's what I've been able to achieve. That has been what I set out to do. I think it's really important for my country, and that's what always comes first
and
for me.
He wished you well?
Yes, he did, and we're going to stay in touch.
Right, okay. He called today on the President Trump today called the Iranian regime a bunch of scum, said the ceasefire is over, and said it's just a waste of time dealing with them. For people back home, how worried should we be about this?
Well, the last day or two has obviously been challenging, and I think most people back at home will be wanting to see the ceasefire continue and wanting to see stability and wanting to see the Strait of Hormuz open, because that means that the impact on our economy will reduce. We've all seen the impact already on energy prices, people going to fill up at the petrol station, and the forecourt can see the impact of that. So what's really important now is, notwithstanding the challenges, that we all focus on getting back to that ceasefire, implementing the understanding, and playing our part in getting the Strait of Hormuz open, which does involve pulling together the coalition that the French and the UK are leading on in relation to reassurance is very important. And so that's where my focus is. I'm not going to pretend the last few days hasn't presented additional challenges. Of course it has. But it's important to keep focused on what is it we want to achieve. Back to the ceasefire, let's get the deal implemented, Strait of Hormuz open. That's really important for the region, for the world, and for every single person listening to this and watching this back in the United Kingdom, because they know that their household bills are likely going to be impacted if we don't get to that situation as quickly as possible.
And Prime Minister, if I may, Nigel Farage has triggered a by-election which you've called a desperate stunt. No one is standing against him apart from Count Binface at the moment. Given the chaos of reform, the difficulties Nigel Farage is in, does it frustrate you that your MPs haven't given you more time to improve Labour's standing in the polls, and they panicked about the next general election maybe too soon?
Well, let me start by saying I think Nigel Farage has been utterly exposed in this complete stunt that he was trying to set up. He's run himself into a cul-de-sac. And it was a stunt, and everybody can see that. And there's a reason for that, and that's because he's up to his neck in sleaze, and he doesn't want to answer questions about it. He doesn't want to answer your questions and questions from the media, doesn't want to answer questions in Parliament. There's a reason for that, and that's because he's got no answers whatsoever. In relation to me, obviously, there are a number of questions which my parliamentary party has been asking in relation to the question who is the best person to pick our party up after the 2019 election, root out anti-Semitism, make us face the country and change the Labour Party. That question's been answered as to who should lead us through that. Who is the right person to lead us to a general election victory, a landslide victory? That question has been answered. Landslide Labour election victories don't come very often. There's only been 3 in the history of the Labour Party, and I delivered one of them. The question the parliamentary party now is asking is, who's the best person to lead us into the next election? They've answered that question. I accept that answer in good grace. And what I'm now doing is making sure that there's an orderly transition, and that whatever comes next goes from strength to strength and succeeds. And I want that to happen because I want a Labour government to succeed, and I want my country to succeed.
And if I may, one final thing, this is your final summit as Prime Minister. You started off on the international stage at Nato, if you remember, in Washington.
Yes.
2 years ago, and you end at a Nato summit here in Turkey. Has it been a bittersweet moment for you, this?
No. I think it's really important for me to emphasise what a privilege it is to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the country that I love, and to be able to represent our country, both at home and on the international stage, is a huge privilege. And in that 2 years, the question now is whether I leave the country in a better state than I inherited 2 years ago. And if you look at the economy, where we've stabilised the economy, on public services, where we've invested in the NHS now with the waiting list coming down at a higher rate for 17 years, what we've done on child poverty, defence and security, where we're increasing spending and capability, and then on the international stage, where our reputation is in a materially better place now than it was 2 years ago. The answer to the question, do I leave the country in a better state than I found it? The answer to that question is yes. My job now is to make sure that my successor can build on that, and that's what I'm doing.
Okay.